if the truth value of P then R and Q then R always the same as truth value of P or Q then R? Go ahead, make a truth table and let me know. I thought we were going to have a worksheet today. No? Sorry, what?
Conditions of rate conditions.
Oh yes, absolutely. So you would have 8 rows there. There are 3 base propositions, P, Q and R. You would get 8 possible combinations. It is true? Okay, why don't you make a truth table? Let's make a truth table. So you're right, the statement is true, but for this part of the course I want you guys to be able to make truth tables. Okay? That's for a week or so. For now, the answer is yes. Without looking at the truth table, let's see how you can figure out why the answer is yes. Okay? So for the first statement, if you look at the first statement, the first part is saying that P guarantees R. Okay? If P is true, then you're guaranteed to get R. The second part says that Q guarantees R. Okay? So these are 2 things which guarantee R. Okay? P guarantees R and Q guarantees R, which means that if either one of them is true, you are guaranteed R. Okay? And that's exactly what the last statement is saying, that P or Q guarantees R. Okay? So you should be able to, just looking at this before you make your truth table, be able to see that these statements are actually equivalent. Okay? I think I have a truth table somewhere here. Yeah, this is just what I was explaining to you. Alright, so you make these, you know how to make these 8 combinations, right? Okay, so after doing that, you start by what's in the parenthesis. Okay, so in the parenthesis you have P then R and Q then R. And this is P then R. P then R would only be false when P is true and R is false. Okay, so you would get 2 rows where this is false. Q then R would also be false when Q is true and R is false. This is one of those and this is the other one. Okay, so you get this. Uske baad next is just a conjunction of these 2. Okay, and this part is, for this part you also need P R Q, jo maine yahan pe nahi banaya. Okay, but you need a separate column for P or Q, then R, and this would only be true. Sorry, this would only be false when this part is true and R part is false. Okay, and you'll see that these 2 are actually the same columns. Okay, awesome. Questions? Are we good? Okay. All right. So there are different ways in which we say the same statement, which is if P then Q. Here's one which says that P is sufficient for Q. Okay, right? जिसके लिए मैं भी word guarantee का भी use कर रहा था. Okay, if P is true, then you don't need anything else to be true for Q to be true. Okay, so you say that P is sufficient for Q. Sufficient is a key word here. Okay, you're going to have to remember the word sufficient here. Okay, the second part is Q is necessary for P. What does that mean? That means that if P happens, then Q will necessarily happen too. Okay, so Q is kind of a necessity. ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि P true हो जाए और Q true ना हो. Okay, Q is necessarily true when P is true. Okay, we said P only if Q. Do we say that? Okay, I'm not sure about the last one. Let's scratch that for now. Okay, I'll come back to you. But remember, अब ये वाली जो चीज़ें हैं पहली 2 हैं, इनको आप reverse नहीं कर सकते. So for example, saying that Q is sufficient for P is not true. Q is not sufficient for P. Okay, when I say if P then Q, then P is sufficient for Q, which means that you don't need anything else apart from P for Q to be true. Okay, but if I were to say that Q is sufficient for P, that would mean that when Q is true, then P is definitely true. That's not the case. Okay, similarly, second statement में Q is necessary for P is You cannot switch their places. Okay, P is not necessary for Q. Okay. I want questions, confusions for the first two part at least. So when I say Q only if P, what that means is that Q is true only if P is true. That's not what I'm saying when I say if P then Q. Q could be true without P being true. Okay? What this is trying to say is that P is true only if Q is true. Okay? That's what I mean by if P then Q. Okay? So this statement is saying if P is true only if Q is true. Okay? What that is saying is that if Q is false, you cannot have P to be true. Okay? That's kind of all this requires is a rephrasing to be able to understand this. If P is true only if Q is true is saying you cannot have P true and Q false. Okay? Okay? It's kind of a mind twister. But let me say it once more. If P then Q is saying P is true only if Q is true. Okay? ये तो मैंने ये वाली स्टेटमेंट रिपीट की. Okay? इसकी जो rephrasing है वो ये है, you cannot have P true if Q is false. Okay, so keep that in mind. You cannot have P true if Q is false. You can say that. Okay, but we will come to that in a couple of slides later. But for now, what I'm saying is this statement is saying that if you cannot have P true and Q false. Okay, P would be true only if Q is true. Okay? Okay? Alright, let's spend some time on it. Okay? Let's rewrite these statements, use some other words. Okay? But these are the key words that we are going to use. Okay? You should be very versed with these. We'll use sufficient a lot, we'll use necessary a lot, even after we move away from logic. Okay? So you should be able to understand this is what it means. Okay? Okay, all these statements describe the same implication, a relation between P and Q. The statements explain different aspects of the implication, but they are logically equivalent.